The 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War between 1618 and 1648 is often considered the largest religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Europe, but the reality was much more complex. It began with the Bohemian Rebellion, when Protestants opposed the Counter-Reformation policies of Emperor Ferdinand II of the Holy Roman Empire. What initially appeared to be a sectarian war quickly developed into a major geopolitical conflict involving various European countries. Sweden and Denmark, which were predominantly Protestant, got involved to expand their influence, while Catholic France supported the Protestant side to weaken the Habsburg dynasty, its main enemy in the European power struggle. The damage caused by this war was immense, especially in the German region, which was the main theater. It is estimated that around 20 to 30% of the German population died as a result of the fighting, starvation, and disease that accompanied the war. Infrastructure was destroyed, the economy collapsed, and many regions experienced extreme depopulation. The conflict finally ended with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, which marked a new era in international diplomacy. The treaty introduced the modern concept of state sovereignty, granted religious freedom to member states of the Holy Roman Empire, and effectively reduced Habsburg power. Overall, the 30 Years' War was more than a religious war. It was a reflection of the struggle for political power and dominance in 17th century Europe. The conflict taught the importance of political compromise in creating peace amidst deep ideological differences. The Crusades. The Crusades between 1095 to 1291 are often seen as a Christian holy mission to wrest the Holy Land of Jerusalem from Muslim control, but the motivations behind them were far more complex and often transcended religion. Beginning with the call of Pope Urbanus II at the Council of Clermont in 1095, the war utilized religious rhetoric to mobilize thousands of European soldiers. Although religion was the initial trigger, many soldiers and leaders joined for economic, political, and social reasons. For the nobles, the Crusades offered opportunities to expand their territories beyond Europe. Regions like Antioch, Edessa, and Tripoli became not only Christian strongholds but also strategic economic centers. On the other hand, peasants oppressed by the feudal system saw the Crusades as an opportunity to improve their lives, both through the spoils of war and the absolution promised by the Church. In addition, city-states such as Venice and Genoa took advantage of the conflict to strengthen their trade dominance in the Mediterranean Sea. With trade routes opened up by the war, economic gain was one of the main motivations of European rulers and merchants. Despite capturing Jerusalem in the First Crusade, the religious goal slowly faded in subsequent expeditions, such as the Fourth Crusade, which ended with the sacking of Constantinople, a fellow Christian city. This shows that the Crusades were not just about religion, but also about power expansion and material gain. Behind the sacred narrative, the conflict reflected more fundamental human ambitions, such as politics and economics. The Reconquista. The Reconquista, fought from 711 to 1492, is often portrayed as a long war of Christians in the Iberian Peninsula to reclaim territory from Muslim rule. However, behind the religious narrative, the Reconquista was also filled with political, economic, and social motivations. Beginning with the Muslim conquest of the Iberian region in the 8th century, the war lasted for nearly 8 centuries and involved various Christian kingdoms such as Castile, Aragon, and Portugal. Religious motivations did play an important role, with Christian figures like El Cid symbolizing the struggle. However, each Christian kingdom also had its own political agenda. The seizure of Muslim territories meant not only religious victory, but also the expansion of resource-rich territories, such as the fertile lands of the Guadalquivir Valley and strategic trade routes. The Reconquista also brought great economic benefits. Cities like Toledo and Granada became lucrative intellectual and economic centers for the new rulers. Moreover, the conquest of Granada in 1492 by Ferdinand II and Isabella I not only ended Muslim rule in Iberia, but also marked the beginning of the political union between Castile and Aragon, which laid the foundation for the formation of modern Spain. In addition, the Reconquista served as a political legitimization tool for Christian rulers to strengthen their power. By carrying the holy war narrative, the monarchs were able to consolidate the support of their nobles and subjects. Therefore, despite religion being the main banner, the Reconquista is an example of how political and economic ambitions are often hidden behind religious rhetoric. The French Wars of Religion. The French Wars of Religion between 1562 and 1598 are often viewed as a conflict between Catholics and Protestants, Huguenots, that lasted for more than 3 decades. However, behind the religious rhetoric, the war was more influenced by a political power struggle between competing major noble families such as the Guise, Catholic, and Bourbon, Protestant. The conflict reflected the political crisis in France, which was exacerbated by the weakening power of the monarchy and increasing pressure from noble groups seeking to seize control. The conflict began with the Vassy massacre in 1562, when Huguenots were massacred by Guise's Catholic forces. This incident triggered a widespread wave of violence, including the St. Bartholomew's Day tragedy in 1572, in which thousands of Protestants were executed in Paris and other cities on the orders of Catherine de' Medici. Although these killings are often seen as the height of religious intolerance, they were actually fueled by political fears of Huguenot influence in the monarchy. Political interests were also evident in the constantly changing alliances. For example, King Henry IV, a Bourbon who was originally Protestant, chose to convert to Catholicism with the famous statement, "Paris deserves a mass," to secure the throne and stop the war. The conflict ended with the Edict of Nantes in 1598, which granted religious toleration to the Huguenots, but also solidified the power of the monarchy. The French wars of religion show how religion often becomes a tool for political elites to strengthen their power, while the general public becomes the victims of conflicts that are actually driven by the ambition of power. The Ottoman-Safavid conflict. The Ottoman-Safavid conflict, 1514 to 1736, is often referred to as a Sunni versus Shia war, but the core of this conflict had much more to do with geopolitical ambitions than theological differences. The Sunni Ottoman Empire and the Shia Safavid Empire vied for control of strategic territories in the Middle East, particularly Mesopotamia, which included important cities such as Baghdad, Basra, and other rich regions. The first notable battle was the Battle of Chaldiran, 1514, in which Ottoman forces under Sultan Selimnos defeated the Safavids led by Shah Ismail the Fur. Although this war is often seen as a victory of Sunnis over Shias, it was actually a move by the Ottomans to expand their territory and secure trade routes to the east. As a result, eastern Anatolia and much of Mesopotamia came under Ottoman control. Apart from Mesopotamia, the war was also about controlling the lucrative trade routes in the Persian Gulf and Caspian Sea regions. Control of these areas not only provided economic benefits, but also strengthened strategic positions in the region. The rivalry between the two empires continued for more than 2 centuries, with several temporary peace treaties such as the Treaty of Zuhab, 1639, which established a territorial boundary between the two empires. However, the peace never lasted long, as both sides always sought to expand their influence. The Ottoman-Safavid conflict shows that, although religion is often used as an excuse, these wars were more about political and economic dominance. These tensions reflect power dynamics in the Middle East that are still relevant today. The Albigensian Crusade. The Albigensian Crusade, 1209 to 1229, is often regarded as a holy campaign to eradicate the Cathar heresy in Languedoc, southern France. However, the conflict went far beyond religious reasons and was more rooted in political and economic ambitions. The Cathars, considered a heretic group by the Catholic Church, were really just an excuse for the rulers of northern France to gain control of the rich territories in the south. Beginning with the call of Pope Innocentius III in 1208, the war was initially aimed at upholding the authority of the Catholic Church in a region dominated by the Cathars. However, it quickly turned into an instrument of power expansion. The northern French nobles, led by Simon de Montfort, used the war to invade and annex the Languedoc region, which was rich in fertile land and trade. One of the most famous events in this war was the Siege of Béziers in 1209. When the Crusaders besieged the city, there was a massive massacre. The legendary phrase, "Kill them all, God will recognize his own," is often associated with this incident, highlighting the brutality of a war that went far beyond religious conflict. The result of this war was the destruction of the Cathar community and the integration of the Languedoc region into the Kingdom of France. This strengthened the power of the French monarchy over the southern region while weakening the local autonomous power of the local nobility. The Albigensian Crusade is a clear example of how religious narratives were used to justify political and economic ambitions. This conflict not only destroyed local identities, but also solidified the centralization of power in France. The War of the Roses. The War of the Roses, 1455 to 1487, is often thought of as a conflict suffused with moral claims and divine legitimization of the English throne. However, at its core, the war was a political power struggle between two branches of the Plantagenet royal family, York and Lancaster. The name roses refers to each family's coat of arms, white roses for York and red roses for Lancaster. The conflicts stem from the political instability caused by the weak reign of King Henry VI of Lancaster. With his serious mental problems and inability to lead, the opportunity arose for the York family to challenge for control of the throne. However, this war was more than just a change of king. It reflected the long rivalry between nobles vying for influence around the monarchy. One of the famous battles was the Battle of Towton, 1461, known as one of the bloodiest battles in English history. The York family's victory in this battle confirmed Edward IV as king. However, the change of power continued until finally Henry Tudor of the Lancaster family won at the Battle of Bosworth Field, 1485, ending the war with the ascension of the Tudor dynasty through his marriage to Elizabeth of York. Beyond the moral narrative, the Wars of the Roses actually reflected a structural crisis in the English feudal system. The conflict resulted in the loss of many nobles and weakened the power of the aristocracy, which then gave way to a more powerful and centralized monarchy under the Tudor dynasty. This is an example of how political struggles are often wrapped in claims of divine legitimacy to gain popular support. The English Civil War. The English Civil War, 1642 to 1651, is often thought of as a conflict between Anglican royalists who supported King Charles I and parliamentary Puritans who wanted to limit royal power. However, the war was much more complex and rooted in deep political, economic, and social tensions. It reflected a constitutional crisis over the limits of monarchical power and the rights of the people through Parliament. The main problems began with Charles I imposing his absolute powers, including taxing without parliamentary approval, which sparked resistance from members of Parliament, especially the Puritans. These tensions culminated when Charles tried to arrest 5 MPs in the House of Commons in 1642, an act that was deemed unlawful and sparked open warfare. The war not only involved a battle between two major forces, but also reflected wider social and economic divisions. Royalists were largely supported by the nobility, Anglican Church, and rural areas, while parliamentarians were supported by the middle class, urban businessmen, and nonconformist religious groups. One of the key battles was the Battle of Naseby, 1645, where the new model army led by Oliver Cromwell defeated the royalist forces. This victory paved the way for the execution of Charles I in 1649 and the formation of the Commonwealth of England, a Cromwell-led republic. Although religion was a factor, the English Civil War was more about political control and the formation of the modern state. The conflict resulted in major changes in the structure of the English government, reducing the power of the monarchy and strengthening the role of Parliament, which laid the foundation for the future system of constitutional democracy. The Taiping Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion, 1850 to 1864, was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, with an estimated death toll of 20 to 30 million people. Although fueled by the religious vision of a charismatic leader, Hong Xiuquan, the rebellion was rooted more in social, economic, and political discontent with the Qing dynasty. Hong, who claimed to be the brother of Jesus Christ, led a movement that called for radical reforms, including land redistribution, the abolition of feudalism, and gender equality. The rebellion stemmed from the poverty and social injustice that plagued China in the mid-19th century. The Qing dynasty, weakened by defeat in the Opium Wars against Western powers, faced severe economic pressure from increased taxes and their inability to cope with famine. This created an atmosphere of widespread discontent, especially among the peasants, who became the backbone of the rebellion. The Taiping established the Taiping Kingdom of Heaven with the capital in Nanjing in 1853. They implemented land redistribution policies and abolished old traditions, such as the practice of foot binding on women, which attracted support from the lower classes. However, their corrupt government structure and internal factionalism weakened the movement. The Qing dynasty, with the help of Western forces such as Charles Gordon's Army of the Straits, managed to crush the rebellion in 1864. The failure of Taiping highlights the complexity of social change in China. Although based on a religious vision, the uprising was a reflection of socio-economic tensions and the people's struggle against tyranny. Its impact is felt into the modern era as a warning of the dangers of extreme social inequality. The Northern Crusades. The Northern Crusades were a series of military campaigns launched by Western European kingdoms and military orders such as the Teutonic Order to conquer pagan territories around the Baltic Sea, including Prussia, Livonia, now Latvia and Estonia, and Lithuania. Although labeled crusades, the conflict was far more influenced by ambitions of territorial expansion and economic control than religious motivations. With the support of the Catholic Church, the war was based on the claim to spread Christianity to the pagan societies of the region. In reality, however, many European states used this religious narrative to legitimize the struggle for land and resources. The Baltic region was strategic, being a major trade route connecting Northern Europe with the Middle East and Asia. Control of this region promised great benefits to city-states like Lübeck and Danzig, as well as the nobles who led the campaigns. One of the important conflicts in the Northern Crusades was the Battle of Saul, 1236, where Lithuanian pagans defeated the Sword Brothers, a Christian military order. Over time, however, pagan power weakened, and the Baltic region was eventually conquered, becoming part of the Teutonic Empire. The impact of the Northern Crusades was profound on the region. Religious conversions were often forced, with local cultures and beliefs being destroyed. On the other hand, Western Europe's political and economic control in the region increased, paving the way for the creation of countries like Estonia and Latvia under German domination. Although wrapped in the pretext of a religious mission, the Northern Crusades were more a form of medieval imperialism, with religion being used as a tool to expand European political and economic influence. The conflict is a reminder that sacred causes are often misused for worldly interests.